we are at Outsourcing Trials in Oncology on May 15th in beautiful Burlingame, California, near San Francisco. I'm David Larwood, CEO of Valley Fever Solutions. That's an antifungal company that I'm running, but I'm here talking about oncology because I'm interested in drugs generally and how that impacts the world and improving health for everybody. So Valley Fever Solutions is working on an antifungal for a rare disease. So it's very challenging to raise money for any company, but particularly if you're working in a small disease space. We have a fabulously effective drug, which we've been advancing over the years. We've been a beneficiary. I've managed about $8 million of NIH money, which moved the project forward significantly. We've demonstrated it in test animals, shown safety in humans. So we're ready to go into sick humans, but that leap requires a lot of money that I haven't been able to raise yet. So one of the things I talked about yesterday was the changes in the FDA, the new administration with a new president, new head of all the departments, including, for instance, a new head of CBER, the Center for Biologics. Vinay Prasad is a professor from UC San Francisco. One of the points I made yesterday is all this is new. There's these statements even coming before the election that there's some concerns about how health is delivered, how it's reviewed, and things like that. So the FDA was organized in the 20s or 30s. The enabling legislation was in the 1920s, I believe. The FDA has been around for a long time, and they find that when something goes wrong, they add some layers of complexity. So when thalidomide was a problem, they said, oh, we need to review things more carefully. So there's layers and layers of what they call guidance. There's also a lot of experience with reviews and drugs that have been successfully reviewed and challenges. So a lot is known. When a new administration comes in, and this is true every 4 years, well, typically every 4 years, there's changes in policy. Those are usually not huge, but it takes some time to roll out. We're actually barely into the new regime. So the last guidance on the FDA on oncology trials, endpoints, and how you evaluate oncology drugs is from January from the previous administration. So we have no guidance yet from the new administration. The last formal guidance is from 2018 on clinical trial endpoints. There's a process in the FDA that's been used for quite a long time that's called accelerated review. There's various forms of accelerated review. Typically, that's for something that's very serious, life-threatening, it's something vastly superior to the current therapies, or there are no current therapies. So that's, of course, very relevant in cancers because the innovations in cancer are staggering. Starting in about the 1950s, they started introducing various anti-cancer drugs, and they get better and better. So now they're using these highly targeted drugs that have not just one antibody targeting the disease, but 2 or 3 antibodies targeting the disease to increase specificity and to avoid what we call off-target effects. I finished my PhD last year in drug design using artificial intelligence designed protein drugs. So I have a lot of experience, and the industry has a ton of experience in how to do these things. And so the FDA has to deal with that. You know, what evidence do you look for? How do you evaluate safety? How do you evaluate efficacy? Particularly when you talk about cancer trials, which are very long, they can easily take years. And so for a drug company, it's just impractical to enroll somebody and 2 years later start the next one, 2 years later start the next one. Even if you're starting 50 people at a time, if the trial's going to go for 20 years, that's just not an effective way to introduce drugs. So part of the accelerated trials allow you to say, we know that if, for instance, we can show that the tumor is shrinking, that's a good sign. I have some personal family experience where a family member had a cancer that was the size of a tennis ball, and he's one of the first CAR T patients, that shrank to the point where it was invisible within a year. Those sorts of endpoints, it doesn't have to be that dramatic, but if the drug sponsor can show benefits and show that to the FDA can say, this looks promising, we'll approve this so you can give it to more people. So there's a lot of commentary about most favored nation pricing. For decades, it's been true that various governmental regimes say, we don't want to pay too much for drugs. We're going to set price controls, price limits on what we'll pay. It's particularly true in Europe. There's various places. A lot of drugs are sold in Africa at very low prices. HIV drugs are practically given away because the drug company has made enough money in other spaces that they can afford to make the drug very available for people that otherwise wouldn't and couldn't be treated. And so that's very important. in the US, going to the MFN saying that we're most favored nation pricing, that we're not going to pay more than anybody else. That's problematic, blowing up the blogosphere. It's true that when Europe imposed price controls, it basically killed the European pharmaceutical industry. It was no longer profitable for European companies to develop drugs because the price controls made it impractical to recover the costs. So a lot of people are looking at that and saying, okay, great, the patients are going to save money, but they'll save actually even more money, because not only will the price be lower, but there won't be any drug at all. There will be zero spend, because the drug companies can't afford to introduce new drugs. So do we want improvements? Do we want fancy new drugs coming out? But some of these drugs cost $2 million per dose or per therapy treatment. So it's not a small question. There's some very important policy questions. We don't know how this will sort out. We don't know how the government's going to respond. There'll be back and forth. There will be hue and cry. There'll be a lot of concern. There is a lot of concern that healthcare won't happen. Now, since drugs take years to develop, this effect may not really be felt for 5 to 10 years. But when the people who are 50 years old now are getting older and they don't have any drugs anymore, they'll say, what could we have done differently? So I don't have deep insight. I don't analyze the trends in great detail, but I do read about this in general. And it's said that the IRA has had an impact similar to what we're talking about. Again, the imposition of price controls. And one of the things that concerns people about the IRA, it says, we will tell you what you're allowed to charge. Okay, there's arguments about whether price controls are good or not. If you don't agree with this, you will have to pay 95% of everything you made. It's extortionate response. So it's basically take it or leave it, and we will kill you. Your company will die if you do not accept the pricing they would give you. Now, how that's actually sorting out in practice is still being watched. Again, when the drug supply starts to dry up, people will say, what could we have done differently?